betting, the final frontier. These are the voyages of the Bet with the Best podcast. Its mission is to explore better ways to bet on races, to seek out new, successful players, and to boldly go where no podcast has gone before.
The Bet with the Best podcast is sponsored by Amwager, an ADW built by horse players for horse players. Speed, power, and ease of use are at the core of Amwager. The platform is packed with features including live video, race replays, conditional wagering, and true odds, a predictive estimate of the off odds that will give you an edge. Amwager gives players the information and tools they need to quickly make anything from a win bet to a complex structured group of pick 5 tickets using the ABC strategy. With a rating of over 4.5 stars on Google, Amwager is a favorite among horse players. Sign up now at amwager.com to take advantage of the simplest sign-up bonus in the business, a 100% first deposit match up to $150. If you want to bet with the best, then you need an edge. You need Amwager.
Welcome to episode 46 of the Bet with the Best podcast. Joining us on the show is the popular racing blogger and longtime horse player of both standard breds and thoroughbreds, as well as a player advocate who has presented at gambling conferences all across North America. He's known on Twitter/X as @PullThePocket, and in the real world as Dean Towers, and he lives in what recently became the U.S.'s frenemy, Canada. Welcome to the show, Dean. How's it going?
Hey, Chris. Thanks for having me. Well, things are well.
Yeah, I'm hoping I don't get hit with a tariff for this show. We'll see.
Takeout.
Well, I really appreciate you've got an interesting journey. I think that the listeners will get a lot out of this conversation. And as you know, as you've listened to the pod before, I like to start out with the guests, what I call their horse player origin story, how they got started in this crazy game. So would you please get us going by telling us your horse player origin story?
Sure. Excuse me. Yeah, mine was definitely a little different. I grew up way northern Ontario, small town, mining town. It's the late 70s, early 80s. There's no horse racing. I have one TV channel. I didn't even see a Triple Crown race. I think we got a second TV channel late 70s that had Wide World of Sports on it, Jim McKay, where they used to show the Triple Crown races, but I never watched one. I don't think I'd ever seen a horse race when I was 12, 13 years old. No way to consume the sport at all. And by happenstance, my dad was a pretty hardworking dude, and he's always trying to find ways to make a little bit of money. And he worked and created a little company with 3 other friends, and they would like an LLC. And on weekends, I remember as a kid going to these places, they'd buy old like mine buildings, like abandoned mine buildings, and then they'd rip out the copper piping or some scrap metal or some wood and then sell it, and then they'd make a little money in this company. And I think they bought a house once, fixed it up, and then rented it out to a student or something, and sold it. And one day, one of the owners or one of the partners in the company, he says, there's a dividend. And he said, forget this dividend thing. I know a guy that knows a guy, and he's a harness horse trainer in Toronto, Orangeville, Ontario. He's got a half-mile track in his backyard. Why don't we buy a horse? Now, usually that advice is like, you're 18 years old at a party. Let's go joyriding with the guy without a license, right? It's a bad idea. But somehow the three other partners said, sounds great. And they contacted him, and he went to New York sale, mixed sale, and bought a standard bred, New York bred, by Most Happy Fella. And they bought him. So I'm excited. Nothing ever happens. I'm 15 or whatever, and I'm totally pumped. I like numbers. I know this is like a exciting thing. I'm pumped to try to figure out this horse racing game. Go into town to our local like Barnes and Noble, which was called Kohl's. The woman looks at me like, I have six heads when I ask for a horse racing book. She's like, there's the hockey section. There's nothing, no way for me to figure out anything. And my dad, I think, goes down to get licensed. I asked him to pick me up programs or anything he can find down there when he goes to get licensed. He goes. It's 700 to 800 miles away from our home to get licensed. And he comes back with like programs, like a thoroughbred program from the trash. Thankfully, the nice gentleman wrote in ink the results, because that was the only way for me to see the results. But I start diving into those things. And the horse races a couple times, and he ends up being pretty decent. Like, he's a pretty decent horse. But I can't go down to see him. I'm in school. And then kind of a rite of passage in our family, we all worked. We applied to work at the mine starting in grade 9. I think that's illegal now. But grade 9, you could work 14, I think, and you'd get summer job. And my school would end Friday, and Monday I'd punch in at 7, and then I'd go right through to Labor Day weekend, the Friday, and then back to school on the Tuesday. So I had no time off. I even worked holidays because it was time and a half. So I couldn't go. The horse raced a few times, and I couldn't go. But so I still whoever would, I'd get mailed a program kind of thing, and I'd look at it. Still couldn't figure out anything about the game at all. Just taught myself by reading the program. Sorry, I got a notification on my Bluetooth there. So the Friday, I think it was a Wednesday of the last week before I'm quitting. My dad, I'm working in the mill, and I'm working in the crushers. It's all dusty and loud, and I see a silhouette, and it was my dad. He worked at the mine. Everybody worked at the mine. And he says, he weighs me up. So I go up, and he said, I got you Friday off. The horse is racing Friday. Your mother and I got you a plane ticket so I could go see the horse. And it was in New York at Roosevelt Raceway. So I flew there, and I landed at LaGuardia. Someone picked me up, like the trainer or something must have picked me up. I would have ended up in a cult. I had zero street smarts, of course. And I think we went to the hotel first. I can't really remember, but I do know that I got there. We walked in when the first race was going off at Roosevelt, and people are throwing programs like at the screen and yelling and screaming, more swearing than I hear at the mine. Tickets, confetti flying everywhere. Obviously, there's littering here allowed at this place, and smoke. The racetrack experience. And I walked into that, and I was like, this is the greatest place on earth. I am pumped. Like, I love this place. And I went down to the rail. I didn't know where to watch the races. I sat at the finish line. There's like a brick wall in front of me. It's the worst place to watch a race. I have no idea. Guys are coming over. There's a guy with a fedora, New York accent. He's telling me about the races. There was a riot at this track when some driver stiffed the horse, and telling stories about Roosevelt. He'd been coming forever, and he finds out, I'm just a young guy. I never bet, from Canada. He tells me, oh, it's a hard place, but I got a system. The system works for me. And I'm thinking, oh my goodness, I'm getting a system from a New York guy with a fedora. His system was 2-4-8, 2 to win, 4 to place, 8 to show. I thought the man was a genius. I'm not even old enough to make a bet. Maybe I can retire. And watched our race. They told me the horse got boxed, but I was watching at the rail, so I didn't see anything. He came 5th, but walked out, and there was a bookstore there. I noticed on the way in, and I go there immediately before we leave, grab a bunch of books. I'm seeing like Buyer, don't know who he is. Looks like an NYU professor. Al Stanley's harness racing book, I think I bought there, was out. I think I bought the Belknap Secretariat biography, which I reread a bunch of years ago, like 5 years ago or something. And I think that was that exact copy I bought when I was 14 or 15. And I walked out of the track and put them in my suitcase and went home and read all those over and over and over again. Still couldn't consume the sport at all, but at least was learning something. And then we had cable TV came in. We had like 10 channels now. I remember I'm watching Family Ties or something, and I think it was that year, they had a promo for the Breeders' Cup, and I didn't even know what the Breeders' Cup was. I bought a racing form at Roosevelt too, and programs, and they had like, racing form was the coolest thing ever. They had news and news headlines. You didn't even have to buy a paper, but no news on this Breeders' Cup thing in there. So I had no way to know it's even going to happen until I saw this promo on a Thursday night. And I tuned in on Saturday at 1:00. And I looked at the mountains. It was Santa Anita. I looked at the mountains, the jockeys, the hats, the drinks, the color. I'm like, this is nicer than Roosevelt. And this sport's got it all. And so I probably the only person in North America to be glued to my TV without a past performance, without knowing a horse. I knew a couple of the trainers because I read them in the books. Like Woody Stevens had a horse. Oh, I know that guy. But I watched the whole thing glued, enthralled the whole day. Watch Rate, I think that was the one with the classic with Gate Dancer with the DQ, right? And I think about it after, and I'm like, I'm probably the only person in the world that doesn't have an opinion on the DQ because I don't even know what the rules are. But I loved it. I just loved every second of it. And if you would have asked me then, Chris, you're going to be on 2025, you're going to be on a podcast with Chris Larmé about racing. And my answer would have been, well, of course I will, because that was it. I was done. And that's kind of how I got into it.
Wow. So you went from knowing nothing at all to just very serendipitously getting involved through your family, your dad's part interest in a racehorse, to where you are today. That's pretty interesting. Anybody else?
Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead.
No, just interesting because I love your pod. It's fun to listen to Paul Matisse, right? It's like my dad was in the Beyer book that I read. He knew the fella that was making figures with Beyer, and Paul's mom made bets for him when he was 12, and a lot of these other people, and even Sean Borman. He on your pod, he explained how his dad sent him to a lawyer, and the lawyer knew Maloney, and like there's all these things intertwined. I knew nothing, nothing, nobody I could. Like it was just totally serendipitous, and I was like learning this on my own. Try to read as many books because I can't even go to the track. I can't. So it was pretty cool. I think I still would have got into it though, Chris, because I'm like puzzles. I like this stuff. I'm pretty sure I would have. My cousin lived with us, worked at the mine. Of course, everybody worked at the mine. He played football. So when I was a kid, he would tell me about point spreads, and he had a bookie in Hamilton, Ontario, which was Southern Ontario, and he bet $50 a game in the fall, and I'd learn a little bit about betting. So I think I would have got into it, but yeah, I was for sure into it with that story.
So now let's pick it up there. How did you become more heavily involved, especially, on the betting side? So how did it go from watching the Breeders' Cup, watching Gate Dancer get DQ'd? That was probably the most exciting Breeders' Cup classic ever. It was a wild finish. Wild again won it, I think, that year. So
yeah, Gate Dancer, the big gray horse. Yeah.
Yeah, slew a goal, Wild again, Gate Dancer, all literally battling down the stretch in that Breeders' Cup. So how did you go from there to becoming involved as a horse player or any other aspects of the game? How did it go from there?
Yeah, I at that time it was like up there previously, everybody's blue collar, so you usually worked at the mine or something. But in the 80s, higher education started to really take hold, and if you got decent marks at school, you went away to go to school, so you had to move away. and I moved. I applied at the University of Toronto, and I went. So it was a couple of years later, and it's a downtown. The campus is downtown, and I got there and immediately figured out that the streetcar, the Carleton streetcar, I could get on it at the edge of campus, and it'd take me right to the Greenwood Raceway, which was a downtown Toronto track. They ran a small thoroughbred meet and a harness meet, and so I got there like the first day I went to the track, and kind of kept going. Like I remember someone end of Frost Week saying, "I'll meet you at the library," and it's like, I don't know where the library is. I find out it's across the street, and it's like one of the biggest libraries in the world. Looks like a peacock. I have no idea that's a library because I was at the track all Frost Week, and I kind of kept going. I would get there at 6 o'clock for warm-ups. This harness racing, 6 p.m. Sit outside, watch warm-ups. Always kills me with thoroughbreds. Remember when Dutrow would, I think Dutrow worked a horse like 2 furlongs on the Friday for a Saturday race, and everybody was, oh my God, the sorcery, what's he doing? Harness horses warm up a mile about 3.5 minutes at like 6 o'clock for say a 9 o'clock race. And then at 7 or 7:30, they come back out and they go an even faster mile. And that's where you'd clock on the last 3/8. A lot of guys would brush their horse the last 3/8 for, they would go in about 48 seconds. They'd go 220 miles. Some of them go 205 before they're racing a 158 mile an hour later. So I would clock all those. I would go early. I'd stay there the whole night, buy the program for the next night or the next night, glance at the racing form. I just go all the time. I went to school. I did my work, but I just went all the time, and didn't do particularly well. But I didn't have much money, so I don't think I lost a lot of money. But I definitely wasn't winning. But I did have, I always had a, that's why I like the Sport of Kings pod with you guys. You always find weird horses like you do. I remember one of the earlier ones I listened to, I think it was a Cal Fairs race, Fresno or something, and some Chilean bred threw the rider and was in the 12 path the whole way around and won the race by like 8. And that was your horse pick for the pod for his next race at Santa Anita. Like, it's just an obscure little horse. And I would always look for those. And I found a couple, actually, I have a funny little story I thought of. I think it was the second year I'm living on my own. I'm working at night, and I don't have I don't have any money. I get paid on the Friday. But I think the previous week, for some reason, I was at Orangeville Raceway, which was a little wee half-mile track, harness track in Ontario. And I don't even know what I was doing there. But there was a horse in the first race that had qualified, which is like a workout line, never raced before. You have to show the judges you can meet time, for those that don't know. He qualified at a track in near Detroit that was just brand new, like opened 2 weeks ago. They were surfacing it and probably experimenting with the surface, but he qualified in 2:18, which is way too slow to race, but the judges must have given time, 6 seconds or something, because they allowed the horse to race. And the horse was in the first. He was like 40-1 because this race is going to go in 2:04 or something. And the horse came second and paced in 2:04. He dropped 14 seconds, 60 lengths off his qualifying line. So I kind of surmised that this new track must be soft and a mess, and the surface is sandy or something. And I went to the track the following week at the downtown track, and I saw the program for the following night had a horse coming from that track that qualified in the same day in 2:06 and won by like 12 lengths. She never had another qualifying line, never raced. And she was a 3-year-old filly. And I said, this could be the bet of the century. So I don't have any money. I think I brought $10 to the track, and I had lost it, and I wasn't getting paid till the following 2 days ahead. And I remember being at home, and in the place I was renting, I went into the change tray, and I never borrowed any money ever to go to the track. I went to the change tray. I had like $4. And then luckily my roommate was a huge giant drinker. Luckily. And he had like a bunch of cases of beer, and there was a beer store down the road, and you could take them back for empties and get 5 cents or 10 cents each. Brought those back. He was away. Didn't ask him. Figure I'll pay him back. And I had a bankroll of to bet the track after admission of $12, and this horse was in the third. I got there at 6 o'clock to watch her warm up, and she looked great. And I went to the third race, and she opened up 15 or 20 to 1, 30 to 1. I'm hearing people talk. Everybody's not even talking about her. And I had $12. Didn't even have enough for 248, which I was probably still betting at the time. And I bet 2 across, I remember, and I bet $1 try key for who she was with the 178. And usually if you should never do the walk to the windows when the race isn't over, but she was on the outside at the top of the lane and traveling so well. I knew this horse should be good, and didn't even wave the whip at her. She won. I think she was chartered, and she won by 3.5. She went 58. She dropped 8 seconds off her time, 40 lengths, and paid $42.40. Try came back $8.95. I remember those numbers because I was flat broke, and now I'm king of the world. I went and bought a burger, Diet Coke, have a grand old time. It was more than my paycheck was a couple of days later. So I think I've always tried, and I found things. I had one summer where I worked at this meat packing plant, paying good money, union wages, and I remember that one summer I made more at the track than I made at the meat packing plant. I paid all my tuition, all my books. I wasn't, I was good. I don't think I hit anything either because there wasn't pick 5s or 6s there. It was just kind of your betting. So I think I had I think I could sniff out some good horses, but I had no idea how to bet. Like, just like most people, right? We just have like 2 across. Like, you're betting to lose, oh, son, you better have some lose money there because you're going to lose. That's the way we learned. Box up the 2 favorites, like things that are just terrible. And so I didn't know how to bet, but I could sniff out the odd horse that, would be at home. If there was a Sport of Kings podcast for harness racing, I probably could have found a horse or 2.
So how did you take the next step from, becoming, being able to find an edge every now and then, but not being too sharp in terms of the way you bet? How did you become a better player? And, what were the keys to making that next step?
Yeah, that was the catalyst. Actually, a friend in first year university I met that I went to the track with, this is later on in the 90s, he moved away, got a job, and I talked to him and kept in touch. He was in another town. And he said, he called me and he said, I said, what are you doing? He goes, oh, I'm playing lots of poker. You should try this poker. And I said, because online poker just started, Poker Stars and Party Poker, I think. And he says, I'm doing really well. He was a math guy, he's a math major, very smart guy. And he said, I'll ship you up some books. He was making more at poker than he was at his job. He was actually thinking of quitting his job. And sent me a big case of books. He had gone to the Gambler's Bookshop, and there are all kinds of books in there. Everything. I opened the top. There's a poker book, so I'm starting to read it. I remember it was by Mason Malmuth. This guy had like a PhD in physics or something, and you could tell. Chapter 3, it was like third year calculus text, and I said to myself, if I have to compete against Mason Malmuth, I'm not playing this game. I'm going to lose. And Mason Malmuth is single-handedly responsible, really, for me never playing another poker hand. I put that book down, Chris. That was 1997 or something. I've never played a poker hand. I haven't even sat in with a friend. No, I know nothing about it. Straight. I don't even know if a straight beats a flush, to be honest. But there were other books, and funny because your podcast guests, it kills me the people you've had on this podcast. There's a Mark Cramer book about making odds lines. I had taken statistics in school. It's a good school. I'd never thought about it. Like, I just never thought about arrays of probabilities and all these things. And I read Mark Cramer's book. There are a bunch of biographies on gamblers, books on money management. I think Dr. Z's book was in there about the play show pool percentages, books on Kelly, books on bet sizing. I mean, things I'd never thought of, and I devoured them. And I immediately thought about the game differently. I would make my contender odds lines. I would realize that I was over betting things. Realize when I was under betting. I completely turned my game, and I wasn't, tearing the doors off and making piles of money. I still didn't have a big bankroll. My first job really didn't pay me that much. But I really did get an idea about how this gambling game would play. All that stuff you see on gambling Twitter now, or things that were talked about on this podcast, in the late 90s, you'd have to get that from a book. Like, all these kids that know everything about bet sizing now just kill me, because there were very few people doing that at the track, right? I'm sure poker people were. I'm sure sports betting people were. I'm sure the professionals in Vegas were, but I'd never hear any of this at the track. So I learned an absolute ton. And it was the impetus for me to really get into understanding a lot about takeout. And by happenstance, it happened again. And it was another one of your podcast guests. It was Maury Wolff. I was sitting at home just scouring the web looking for things about beating takeout or takeout rates or something, the mathematics of gambling. And I stumbled upon a Harness Tracks of America conference, which was like the RTIP, but was for harness racing, run by Stan Bergstein. He used to write for the Post, was a racing guy for the New York Post. And it was a transcript. It wasn't there were no video and audio, no YouTube, and it was long. And Maury was talking about takeout rates, and he brought a guy with him, and his name was David Kaskuna. And Kaskuna was a New York Horseplayer that was getting rebates. He knew Ernie Dahlman and all these guys, and he was talking about how his handle exploded because he was getting rebates. And I just read it over again and said, I have to find some of these because I'm learning about gambling. I know how much the takeout is killing me. If I can eliminate that takeout a little bit, I'm going to be in good shape here, because I am kind of breaking even. I know that's cliche, but it was kind of that. And I need to really take a shot here with this. So I looked around and found there was a European place, fully legal, fully par mutual. They had the Meadowlands, which I played in harness. I played that a lot. That was a staple track, so that was imperative. They had like Mountaineer. I think they had Turf Paradise, and then like 57 Greyhound tracks, but that's all they had. But it was enough for me because I wasn't really playing the thoroughbreds. I was just going to play the Meadowlands. I put my money in. I got some rates that were, kills me. People think it's whales doing the rebate stuff, but they were, all you had to do was look for them. Anybody. I put $500 in my first account there, and I just started playing, and it was remarkable how much better I was doing. Like, I was confident because I was making some money. I was getting back money in the mornings. I'd have a day where I'd lost a little bit. I'd go up and go, I didn't lose. I made $20. Like, it was really weird. And over time, it just felt like I had a big chance here. And I kept playing, just playing Mountaineer, or just playing Meadowlands. And then I started flipping on Mountaineer, got a program. Mark Patterson there, I've always liked. I've talked to Mark over the years too. He's such a nice guy, and he's sharp. So I would learn all about the Mountaineer circuit because it was on at night, right? And they used to run 5 nights a week. They were one of the first export tracks. Mary Alice Williams ran that place. I think that's her name. They did $30,000 a night in 1998, but they exported their signal to all these places. They were pushing $1 million a night, I think, in the early 2000s. So I started playing a little bit of Mountaineer, and then my volume started to go up. I just had more money. I didn't feel I was winning more. I didn't feel like I was sharp. I just felt I was making a few dollars, and it wasn't relenting. Like, I was still making money consistently. And then by happenstance, once again, my friend that is now a professional gambler, same guy that gave me the gambling books, he called and said, Betfair opened. It's brand new. You should check it out. So I signed up for an account there. What do I discover they have there? They have Mountaineer. They have horse race tracks. And people actually met one of the founding partners at a conference of Betfair years later, and I told him, you were supposed to destroy racing, but you are single-handedly responsible, really, for me playing so much in the thoroughbred pools for that decade when I was playing regularly, because I got into thoroughbred racing because of Betfair. I started watching the tote, watching the trading on the exchange, just at Mountaineer. And I started to, that Dale Baird horse is going down to 4-5. I don't know why it's 2-1 at Betfair. I know it's 7-2 on the board at Mountaineer, but that horse is getting hammered. You know, that I was trying to find closing line value, and I started just betting free bets. So I tried to get a horse at 2-1 that would be even money. I'd sell the horse at even money, whatever I bought at 2-1, and I'd tap the difference as a free bet. And I started to make a little bit of money like that, just fooling around. And then not long after, I started doing it with Aqueduct and other tracks. Excuse me, just had a drink. And I started playing those the same way. I started just, I think Serling was on then, you know, you just listen to Serling. I have my Bridge program. I'm trying to figure out that David Jacobson horse is going to get hammered, that kind of stuff. And I would go for free bets. I did that for 6 months or 8 months. So I was having the rebate account for one side, and I had Betfair on the other for this win money. And my balances were going up, and I never had that before.
So can you explain a little bit more on your, it sounds like you were sort of betting both sides of a bet at different prices to kind of lock in a profit. Can you explain that a little bit more, what you were doing at Betfair?
Yeah, it's just, you know, you can trade horses. It's really called greening up. You know, you could buy, and you can do it with any sport. You could, you know, Super Bowl, the Packers would open up at 1 point, I don't know, it's 1.8, 4-5. And so you could buy a position at 1.8. You could say, I wouldn't do this because I wasn't be betting thousands of dollars then, but you know, you bet $1,000 at 1.8, your profit on that's 800. Well, if the odds go down because there's an injury with the other team, you can sell your $1,000 at 1.7 and you owe $700 if Pittsburgh wins, but you make $800 if Pittsburgh wins. So you're greened up. So you make $100 free bet. You're doing just the same thing. You're just trying to get closing line value on these things, but you're also selling your position. When I got going, I kept my positions because I had an opinion on the horse. So that was the whole part of that game at that time, was get a horse at 7-2 that's going to pay $760. Get a horse at 3-1 that might pay $580. And I'd keep the position, but you could sell your position and you'd be green. So if the horse won, you'd make money. If the horse lost, you wouldn't lose any money.
So it sounds like once you felt like you were a little sharper on the assessing the chances side, rather than lock in a smaller profit, you were willing to take on a little more risk, but long-term make more. Is that fair to say?
Right. And that was a process for me, Chris, because I was not a great thoroughbred player. I read all the books, had gone, knew basic concepts. I continued to read all the books. All the DRF press books were coming out. I read everything I could. Brohammer stuff, like I read everything, but I wasn't putting it into practice, and I wasn't naive enough to think I could beat the thoroughbreds, even with a rebate, even within the little edge in the win pool. So I knew I had to do something, and if I wanted to do that. And I started to scour around for things like Ed and Susan Bain. You remember them? They had statistics. I think they had Formulator before Formulator existed, and they would post a bunch of statistics about this trainer off, 34 to 48 days or whatever. This guy off a claim, or this horse cutting back, and all these things. I found those statistics, and I started reading those, and I read them with my Bridge program and started to sharpen an opinion a little bit at some races. But I wanted something that could do everything, because Betfair had every track. And the rebate shop now had all these tracks, all of them, like Evangeline, Sunderland, Prairie Meadows, Yavapai, everything. And I wanted to do something mechanically where I could find a contender. I could get a horse at 3-1 or 4-1 up there that was going to pay $6 using some of the things I learned about how the tote and Betfair were interacting. So I scoured around it. I found HTR, Ken Mass's stuff. I think Judy Wagner was on a podcast with you, with your Sport of Kings podcast, and she said she's an HTR player still. So Ken's still around. Dave Schwartz had a program that was pretty cool, but it didn't do what I wanted to do. And then I, on paceadvantage.com, I had met Jeff Platt, who created JCapper, and I chatted with him, and I immediately liked him. He's got a real stoic. He reminds me of Mike Maloney. Mike's very stoic and calm about things, and Jeff was just this calming guy that was doing geeky database handicapping, and he'd been playing professionally for like 8 years. And he created this program where I could scour all these databases without being a techie. I didn't have a computer science background. And I could gather all this data and I could test everything. Like I could build track profiles. It takes some doing. I'd have to be able to do it, learn how to do it, but I could build track profiles. I could look at jockeys. I could look at all the things that you can look at on Formulator, but even more back then. I could also get some very, very interesting proprietary figures. Like there was a workout score that he developed. There was a basic fitness score, which was really cool for first and second time starters. And you could data mine that with all this data. So I bought a bunch of data off Equibase. I was doing decent at the track at that time. So I had my bank money from the track, and this industry just angers me so much. I think I spent $4,000 on data, which just takes away from your bankroll, right? Like it's just a barrier for people to enjoy the sport. There's not a lot of people that are going to put $4,000 into this, but unfortunately I was doing okay at the track. But I did that, and I lived in that thing. I was, I'd spend hours, and I enjoyed it. It was a labor of love. Like I love checking out angles. I had books that said, the old Gambler's Bookshop. I bought a book that was 20 foolproof angles for thoroughbred racing, and I'd be able to run those angles by querying them. Spoiler alert: none of them were ROI positive, but you'd be able to really find things. And I started to find things, and once I started to find things with one track, I could find things with other tracks, and so it wouldn't matter what the track was, Chris. Like I thought Sunland Park was in Mexico for years. I didn't even know where it was. Prairie Meadows? In the prairie somewhere. I didn't know where a bunch of these places were. I was playing them. But I could tell you what jockeys would take advantage of the bias, when there was a bias, when there wasn't a bias. I could tell you what trainer moves at that track. I could tell you the guys with first-time starters, how they would work out their horse. Like I could tell you a lot of things about the track without knowing even where it was. And that's when I started to play those horses in the pools more. And I became like playing this volume that I never thought possible, that I didn't tell anybody about. They would have thought I was, some blowhard guy at the track if I told them like how much I bet yesterday. Like I never was like that anyway, but it would have been weird. I never met anybody that was doing this kind of stuff. There was no, it was a much more insular world even back then without texting and things. I didn't see anybody doing it. I would go through these bankroll swings where I didn't even know what I was doing. I was flying by the seat of my pants. I didn't know how to handle half the things. Actually, the first person, another podcast guest, the first person I met that actually I could talk to about this stuff was inside the pylons. I met him on Pace Advantage. He DM'd me, saw an answer I gave to a post about something, and he thought I was playing regularly, and he DM'd me and said, "Hey, can I get your phone number?" And I talked to him for hours. It was like the first guy I talked to he was doing a lot of the same things. And first person I could tell a story to where he wouldn't think I was, telling some tall tale or something, because it was so different than people were doing. But it was an odd time, solitary time. But I just jumped both feet in. I played a ton of tracks, a ton of races, using my edge at Betfair and a little bit of my knowledge of the pools and learning to bet a little bit better. I take advantage of the superfectas because they were dollar minimums. I was just getting better, and I didn't think I'd ever be able to do that kind of volume at that time, but it was happening, and I wasn't losing. Like, it just didn't seem to be ending. I always thought tomorrow's the last day, tomorrow's the last day or whatever, and it never seemed to end.
So can you give a few examples of the kinds of angles that you would find through this data mining process that you used? Some of them that you remember that were more profitable, and did they stay profitable or were you constantly finding new ones because the other ones would kind of eventually the edge would go away? I'm just curious about how that worked.
Yeah, the way you'd go is you'd build almost like a horse profile that's winning at that track. So, Mountaineer, for example, another podcast reference. It's hilarious how many people you've had on this. I was a customer of CJ's, pacefigures.com, which was the precursor to Timeform Figures. He made fantastic figures. And his pace figures were so good at some tracks, like some of the smaller tracks you would play that would run like 5 maiden claimers. I think for 2 years, his CJ's pace figure at Mountaineer and sprints with maiden claimers was profitable on its own. I remember running the numbers for 6 months, and it was ridiculously high. I had a pace figure similar. I always found CJ's pace figures were the best. I would use that. So I would use that until it would not work anymore. There were first-time starter angles, just the whole workout pattern. And then you would compare them to, if it was a Pletcher, you'd compare how Pletcher worked this set of horses that, won at 28% or 35% versus how he worked a set of horses that would win at 19%. And the public would bet them both the same. So your angle was, and actually one of the Pletcher angles still works. I've got it set up. It's Pletcher Can't Run, I call it. It's 0 for 3 with the last 3, and he was 1 to 5, 4 to 5, and 8 to 5, or 0 for 3 with the last 3. It still kind of works today. So they're little ways guys would get horses ready. A lot of the early speed stuff, it was still not really bet that hard. Steve Klein's book, I don't know if you read it, The Power of Early Speed. He went through like 8 years of races in the 90s and found that the pace figure in sprints, dirt sprints, was like 0.96 or something like that ROI. So there are a bunch of early speed stuff if the track was an early speed track. But biases were weird. Pauly came in at Turfway, and there was that big wide swoop. You bet outside posts with wide swoops. So I would build models that would flag pace adjusted late and all that for that track. Trainer angles that weren't in the form. Just the way like Jamie Ness David Jacobson would claim a horse, and he wouldn't work the horse. And if it returned within 20 to 30 days, those numbers still weren't in the program then. So that hit at 34%. So I would go long on that. Stuff like that, just basic things. A lot of them are in the program now. A lot of things, the edges are all gone, but little things that were slightly different of what, you'd find in the form. I would look at those, and I knew the historical hit rate. I knew enough about data. I didn't just fall off the turnip truck. I'm definitely not a programmer. I'm not a math geek, but I knew something about it. So I knew how to not overlayer. I knew how to make sure that the data would make sense. So if you took out a piece of data from some series, it had to make logical sense, and you weren't just taking it out to get a higher hit rate. So the things that I built during that time, and then learned about handicapping by listening to a lot of people that were smarter than me, I think that honed it enough where I was never a great player, but I found some good horses. And if I manage my money right, I might be able to break even. And breaking even without a rebate meant you were making money. And breaking even, say, in the win pool, tote, I would make money because I would be betting these horses at a higher odds than the tote at Betfair. So it all worked to generate profit. And when you generate a small amount of profit on per bet, you want to bet more. That's what I talked inside the pylons about the first time. He's like, well, you should bet more. You should bet more. I didn't really understand that because I didn't know what I was doing, but that was the kind of stuff I was up to, Chris. No magic, just grinding away. It was just grinding away.
Well, one of the things you recognized was you wanted to find, you could get an edge by having information that was not available to the general public. So you had that idea of pari-mutuel wagering and how you're competing with other people. And if you need to find that edge, and ideally, you're going to find it using the information that's not readily available to everybody else. It sounds like that was sort of your main approach.
It was a whole ball game for me. Absolute whole ball game. I wasn't going to out handicap NHC Hall of Famer Chris Larmé, Mike Maloney, Sean Berman. No way. But I could find enough pockets of it and get a good price. And I knew kind of the way the tote acted. I watched the tote every single race, hundreds and hundreds of them. And I just got an idea about the interactions. Smart money at Betfair, money in the tote where money was funneling. That helped. But yeah, and even in harness racing, Chris, which I was making more money in harness racing with the rebate, I would keep statistics on detention barns. They were the rage because of milkshaking, so they'd put guys in detention barns, and they of course didn't publish it in the program because that would raise too many red flags. Why is this guy 4% when you watch his horse for 24 hours and he's 40% when you don't? I'd keep all those statistics. There were bike changes in harness racing at the time. Guys were buying their these expensive bikes. They're called Harmer bikes, and they had light wheels. They were slightly offset. And when the harness racing is mostly intent, like the horses are fairly evenly matched, and they're not hard to handicap, which is the fastest horse, but the driver intent is paramount. So if a driver bought this new Harmer, and a trainer was using his old beat up bike, and the horse was ready to go, the driver would ask the trainer, hey, can I use my bike on this horse? And if the horse is sound and the trainer's okay with you giving the horse a big front end try, that would be a green light for you. So I would, actually a friend of mine had a huge database and he would send it to me. We were kind of working together on the harness, and he would send all the bike changes for me for a given night. And people weren't betting them, Chris. Like, I don't understand it. It was like that edge would be so eroded so fast now, but people weren't betting them. I would get 30-1 on some horses that the driver was gonna try and get a pocket trip. And one night I remember 8 bike changes won out of 10 races at the Meadowlands, and they were 2 or 3 guys that got new bikes. 8 out of 10, I had like the best day I think I've ever had at the harness races betting bike changes. So that wasn't in the program, and the edge wasn't eroded. The things we used to find back in the day, that right back to when I'm trading in pop bottles for that filly, to really the 2000s, that edge would not get eroded right away. And all of that stuff I was looking for. I mean, I had to do that.
So talk a little bit more about, you say you spent a lot of time watching the tote and learning from that. So like, what were you watching for? What did you learn about tote action? And then comparing that to what you saw on Betfair. I mean, because certainly the tote's still in play today and Betfair is still out there. So I'm just curious, what were you doing then in that regard? Because that's something most of the listeners probably don't do or aren't familiar with.
Yeah, it's different today. Certainly, it's one of the reasons I came back to play is watching handicapping and handicappers and handicapping the market now. Well,
let's talk about what you did then, because I want to get to what you're doing now, but I'd kind of like to finish up what you were doing before, and then we can kind of contrast it with what you're doing now and why you changed some of your approaches.
Yeah, it was It was just looking where people were. Betfair was so weird because it was UK bettors. Like Mountaineer would only have action for the first 5 races, and then everybody would go to bed. It was 4 hours ahead. It was a bunch of European bettors. And if a horse opened up at 4-5 and was a 5-2 morning line, and the betting started fairly early. Betfair now, or the exchanges, it's all at the end, just like everything. But really 9 minutes to post, they would, if a horse was 4-5 and looked super active and it was a morning line favorite, we didn't have the will pays back then either on many races. So they would hammer that horse. They would absolutely hammer the horse. But if you looked at the exacta probables, for example, you could tell if the horse is taking money in all pools. Same signal we can use today. If you want to know if a horse is really taking money everywhere by CAWs, they're betting every pool. And eventually, at least. But back then, you would want to see if that horse was 4-5, you'd want to see the 5-1 shot, the 4-5 onto the 5-1 shot. You want to see that exact be the chalk one. You'd want to see him active in those pools. Even the play show pool you could look at because people bet early, and you'd want to see some sort of, the usual kind of grade of a horse that's going to be bet at 4-5. And if I didn't see that, I'd sell that horse right away, and that horse would drift right up. That was one way to take advantage of really the tote wasn't that bright, or the Betfair wasn't as sharp as it certainly did later on. You'd also look at what I expected. So I had I had those printouts. So I had JCapper, and it would print out everything for me and give me all my plays, but it also built an odds line, and I'd have Super Tote up. You could actually at that time connect Super Tote to JCapper, which is really cool. So it'd show your edges, kind of like what Optics does today, where you guys are putting in. That's a great service where you put in your grades and it changes the edge. I'd have that up. So there's things, if I expected something to be bet to 2-1, and I went through everything and saw that, money is funneling into this horse at 2-1, that was kind of I expect that's fine. But when I look at the tote money coming in on the tote and look at everything, it was mainly if there was a horse I didn't expect it. I had a different number on the horse, then I'd look into it more and I'd say, well, they're funneling. Smart money is funneling money through this horse. And sometimes I'd bet those at Betfair, they'd be the ones that get hammered at the end. And you could get a higher price on it. You could get 5-6-1 on some of these things. Even today, I watch everything today now as well. And even today, there's a wild discrepancy at times. Wild discrepancy. So you just look at the discrepancies, try to understand what was happening. There was no magic bullet. It was just a lot of feel, a lot of just read and recognition. You get a competency when you're looking at it every day, every race, comparing the two, and you just know how things are probably going to settle, and you try to take advantage of it that way. That would also help in the pools, because if I centered on a horse that, say it was a horse I didn't have, but I had a little tiny model on, but it was super live, and it was a barn that I know is generally live when they win, that would be my key in the pick 4. Even though I might not have it rated as high, I would just look at that money coming in. I would bet that at Betfair, usually at a higher price than close. It'd get hammered at the end. I might get $12 and it's paying $6. They would be that much on some of those horses. So that's kind of the way I did it, but there was no roadmap. I couldn't write a book and say, here's how I did it. It was just really feel recognition, just watching them interact and looking for little holes the best you can.
But it almost sounds like you're sort of doing inverse value handicapping, where you think
really
they're based on your handicapping opinion, this is a terrible bet, but based on your experience of watching the tote, it's probably a really good bet. And so you trusted your knowledge of the tote over your knowledge of your assessing the horse's chances. Is that fair to say?
Yeah. And Chris, I do it today. Like back then, if I had a horse that I had flagged for something with a really cool trainer move or something that was kind of obscure, and it was 10-1, not taking an inch of money, I'd bet more. Today, if that horse I expect it to be 4-1 and it's 10-1, and I like it, and I've got the same model on it, I don't bet a penny. My money just stays in my wallet. But back then, I'd say 70% of the time I would hammer that horse even more. But there were certain barns, there were certain guys off the claim, there were certain first-time starter stuff where, of course, you had to see some money.
No, that makes sense. I've always said that if a horse goes off at a much higher price than you assess and you don't understand why that's true, you probably should do just what you described. You might want to at least downgrade your, the chances of that horse winning. But I do think that when you expect the horse to be a higher price and it's the price you expected, and you know why, you think you understand why the public is, doesn't give that horse the same chance that you think it does. You have a reason to think you have an edge. Then I think you can't be afraid to play into it. But I think it's a big difference between, expecting a certain price and getting it versus not expecting it and getting it, and how you deal with that information makes sense. I think, in one way you need to trust your opinion. The other way, though, you have to acknowledge that there may be information you're not privy to, and that's showing up in the tote that you didn't take into account when you assess the horse's chances.
That's the read and recognition part. Like it's frustrating at times because you will have a horse you believe needs to take some money to show you something today, especially because the money's so sharp, and then the horse will not show that, and then it'll run off the screen and you're kicking yourself or whatever. It's a balancing act for me. I think today is different than back then. In fact, at Betfair, Chris, and I remember talking, or just a Twitter conversation with Dennis Montoro about that, where he talked about the favorite long shot bias and how it's, it's alive and well. It's probably worse than it's ever been. But my ROI at Betfair on horses over 20-1 was higher than any other odds level that I had, because I would take my stabs on those. And I don't think it would be different today, because those horses now are so far out. Like they're bet so out. And if you have a bet or a Sport of Kings pod bet where the jockey threw the rider at a fair track and is at Santa Anita, like you might be able to get 60 or 80 or 100 or 120-1 on those, and they're 15 or 18-1 on the tote. Like you can still take advantage of those in an exchange environment, which I wish we had, of course, in North America. I think you always want to take pokes on certain little things, but you can adjust your bet size on it. So I can still bet my long shots when ones I like with a little model, and I do, but I just bet smaller. And I do definitely like to see just a little bit of something that says, and it could be many things, it could be an odds board where the CAWs think it's a dog's breakfast. That race, I'll always bet a long shot if I like one. So there's different, if they're signaling that, nah, this isn't a race for a long shot. This isn't one of those horses that are going to win this race. And I know you're on them. I know you got a couple models, but this isn't one of those races. Then I will temper that back. But I did a hybrid of that. It was always a tightrope. It was a balancing act. I love long shots. People make fun of me for betting too many of them. I like to find those goofy horses, and I bet them quite a bit back then. But for general signals, if I was making a big bet or a key in a pick 5 or something, I would like to see a certain flow to the way the race was going, the money flowing into somewhere. Like if there's a super, super obvious horse that's everybody's got loan speed and the loan speed isn't taking money, I immediately say why. And I'd say, maybe I got to look for something. I'm not seeing this right. I'm not seeing this pace scenario right. And time after time, there'd be a jock that would be it wouldn't be Lone Speed. There'd be somebody else on top. Like somebody saw something there. And so I like to pay attention to that, especially today.
So, well, one last question about what you were doing back then, and then you can talk about, then we'll go into sort of how your edge evaporated and then how you've kind of transformed yourself into a different approach now. But, did you change, just the way you bet in terms of the, how you structured your bets or pools you were betting into? I mean, did you do anything, a lot differently from a betting standpoint once you got, started scaling up the volume, or did you pretty much stick with what you had been doing all along?
Yeah, I wish I would have, when ITP started chatting with ITP, I wish I would have just had the conversations about, how do I bet better? Because I wasn't doing it very well, Chris. If you have green at the end of the year, like everything gets glossed over, all your little mistakes. I made mistakes. Like I said, with Betfair, it was part of my process. So I'd go in there, I'd look at what's going on. That's where I kind of handicapped the handicappers, had my numbers, and then I would decide what to bet. And it would be 4 minutes to post. And then I'd say, oh, it starts at pick 4. And I'd have to go ahead and look at it and do things too quick. I didn't have a real plan for that. I certainly didn't play structured tickets like I play them now. I was pretty poor. The only thing that was really, really smart, Inside the Pylons mentioned this on his podcast too, with all of the gimmicks that people like to play. He says, make your win bet. If you like that horse, make your win bet. Play a few verticals if you want. Do your pick 5, but make sure you make that win bet. And because I was brought up with the Betfair side, I would always have a sizable win bet on something I really liked. So I always had that in my back pocket. And if I overspent in exotics, which I did many, many times, because you're pushing volume, I always say every horse player's got a silver charm on one shoulder and a devil's bag on the other. And silver charm is telling you, to bet properly, to not push this, don't chase. And devil's bags on the other going hit send. You want it. You got to push volume. Those bets were bad for me. But because at the end of the year, I was green, I didn't care. And that's one of the things when I changed my game to play today. I went through every statistic and found where I'm losing, my edge. I'm just completely boneheadedly making some plays. And I can't do that anymore because I'm not going to push volume in this environment. It's so hard now. Back then, I think I could get away with it, but I'd give myself, like, considering how much I was betting, you'd think I'd know something. I'd be better. I'd be ITP. I wasn't. I was like a 5 out of 10, I'd say, Chris. Kind of embarrassing, really.
But you did kind of stick to the basics regardless in terms of, locking in that win bet on if you have strong opinions. And not just ITP, but, we've had multiple guests that always talk about, start simple and build out.
Yeah.
And so that's really good advice for anybody, I think, is, and also I've always said, if you can't make money in the win pool, you're probably not going to make money in other pools unless you're just extraordinary on the betting side. So that to me is a great place to start and to keep track of your performance to see how well you're actually doing.
I absolutely agree. After 6 months, you have your bet, and win pool is so easy to bet size. Like, it's the easiest thing. How do you bet size a super, right? Compared to your bankroll. I mean, bet sizing a win bet is simple. Forget about knowing your edge or something. Just, bet unit betting. You could bet to win $100. You have a $3,000 bankroll. Bet to win $100. So if you're betting an even money shot, that could be $100. That's 7.5% of your bankroll. A little high, but you're betting to win 100. And if your horse is, 10 to 1, you can bet $10. It's really easy to stay within your confines of bankrolls and an inch ahead if your opinion's good by betting in the win pool. And like you say, you have your ROI. It's not going to lie to you. It can go up and down, so you don't want to make conclusions early. But if you're playing for 6 months and you kept track of your win money and you bet it properly, and you have good opinions, and you've got a 1.03 or 1.05 or 1.11, you're listen to some ITP pods, listen to Paul, listen to Sean, listen to Barry Meadows pods, and pick up what they did in pick end tickets and exactas and things like that, because you are probably on your way to doing some really good things. I agree with you 100%.
Well, that's good. And I think that's a good place to pause right here and end part one of our discussion. But we'll pick it up again in part two, which will be the next episode. And we'll focus then on sort of your renaissance as a horse player, maybe talk a little bit about how your edges faded away, but then how you've come back in the modern game. We can talk about what you think has changed and how you've changed your approach. And I think that'll be, especially interesting for the players. But for now, let's wrap it up. I want to thank you for coming on and sharing your insights, so far. And I look forward to continuing the conversation. But until then, may you all boldly go where no horse player has gone before.